أناجي الحق في ليل بهيم أصدق النجوى وأدعو الله من قلب سليم يطلب التقوى أناجي الحق في ليل بهيم أصدق النجوى وأدعو الله من قلب سليم يطلب التقوى.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ahlan wa sahlan wa marhaban bikum, and welcome to another edition of Perspective. My name is Faizel Patel. In tonight's show, we look at the Muslim Civil Society Conference that took place last weekend. Remember, you can interact with me by sending me a mail on faisal@itvnetworks.tv, drop me a tweet on @Faizi143, or you can even comment on facebook.com/Faisal Patel. Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa delivered the keynote address at the Muslim Civil Society Conference aimed at instigating dialogue about key issues of the National Development Plan at the Wanderers Club in Johannesburg on Friday night. Now, the conference, organized by the Oval Socio-Economic Research Institute, brought together leaders, professionals, and representatives of Muslim society organizations from across South Africa. Now, the NDP has been hailed by the media, business, the government, and the political opposition. However, the South African Institute for Race Relations analysis last year on the NDP has uncovered a quagmire of ideological dyslexia, economic confusion, and conflicting ideas. It said the National Development Plan, or NDP, is fatally flawed and will fail to achieve its social and economic aims. But ASRI says practical solutions to critical costs of the socio-economic issues facing South African society can be achieved by partnering with government and other civil society organizations and communities. ASRI's Mohammed Kaji, who I spoke to, says solutions to issues in the NDP can only be achieved if civil society works with government to alter that particular trajectory. He says it's a responsibility of citizens and civil society to engage with the plan, understand it, and critique it. Now, the conference, which took place on Saturday in Johannesburg, had 8 panel discussions on the NDP, tackling issues from fixing education, fighting corruption, and building the nation. But the Friday night gala was where Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa spoke, Maulana Ibrahim Bam spoke, and also Mohammed Kaji spoke. We're going to be watching some of the speeches by these 3 honored dignitaries. Let's have a look at that.
There have been many achievements over the past 20 years in the provision of access to water, electricity, housing, healthcare, and education. But our country is still facing some major challenges, which have been captured in the diagnostic report of the National Development Plan that we're here to discuss at the conference this weekend. And the NDP proposes solutions in its chapters within it. 20 years into democracy, xenophobia and tribalism is on the increase. The quality of public health care and education needs to be improved. Corruption is at high levels, and the levels of crime are also high. And the majority of our country's youth between the ages of 18 and 35 are still unemployed. These factors, coupled with the increasing loss of patience and confidence to deliver on promises, is a recipe for violent socio-economic upheaval in the next decade, the symptoms of which we already see in the service delivery protests, the xenophobic violence, as well as the recent anti-apartheid statue revolts. We, the citizens of South Africa, cannot sit inactive as the fundamental principles and values of our Constitution and our democratic institutions need support more than ever before from ourselves. The only viable solution is to activate South African civil society, where we work together with government, businesses, religious groups, and other civil society organizations, activists, and interest groups to implement practical solutions to the critical socio-economic issues facing South African society. We have to act in unison as wider civil society, regardless of race, religion, class, or political ideology, to build South Africa and make it work. And that's the purpose of this conference. As we've heard, the Muslim community has been actively involved in the struggle for freedom. And now we need to ask the question, what is the most effective means of further contributing to the development of our country? The answer would be that we have to play a supporting role to entrench democracy, eliminate poverty, provide access to quality public education, healthcare, and employment to all citizens, as well as fostering a society free of crime and violence.
We live in a diverse country with many languages, many cultures, and many faiths. That's who we are as South Africans. To quote the National Development Plan, we are a community of multiple overlapping identities, cosmopolitan in our nationhood, very mixed in our makeup, dynamic in our character. That's who we are as South Africans. We are also a divided nation where our individual circumstances are still largely determined by the contours of race, gender, class, and history in terms of where we come from. We are a country of competing interests and contesting views. We differ, we argue, and we fight. And yet we are bound together as a people. We occupy the same land and we share the same future, whether we like it or not. The future we share is the same. And it is for this reason that we needed a plan. Just as we needed a plan in 1955, as our forebears were facing the monster of apartheid. They got together and said, we need a plan, a collective vision that will take us to freedom. We need something that all of us can mobilize around, coalesce around, unite around, to be able to fight this monster called apartheid. And that is what the Freedom Charter did for them. Today, where we are, because we are bound together and we have a common future, we need this plan. We need a common program to guide our efforts. We need to have an overarching vision to which we can all aspire and towards which we can all work and put our shoulders to wheel. Civil society organizations are therefore critical and central in an effort like this. They are the heart of the nation when it comes to matters like this. They provide a crucial link between society and government. They help to hold officials to account and ensure that they are responsive to the needs of the citizens.
Today it has become somewhat trendy, not only amongst Muslim community, but also the broader community of South Africans, to sit back and become an armchair critic, go in isolation and say this is wrong and that is wrong, without making and taking an active part in playing your role in making the community a better place. It has become trendy. But one thing which is very important for us to understand, that many times people tend to shy away from community activity and civil engagement and tend to go into isolation, thinking in this way they will preserve their identity. In fact, self-preservation is more likely to be achieved by active engagement rather than isolation. For in isolation you cannot change the tide of events. And the creeping tide of events are likely to overtake you if you remain in isolation. We've got to keep in mind isolation limits our potential to successfully tackle the challenges facing our community and the broader community and that of our country. It is also important for us to understand that our destiny is linked to the destiny of people who are around us. We rise and we fall together. It is impossible that you can be in an island of prosperity in the midst of poverty. The Quran and the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, has taught us we rise and we fall together. The very beautiful parable the Prophet Muhammad gave us, which you and I have heard from our learned scholars, is the example of people who are in the upper deck and the lower deck of a ship and a boat. And the people in the lower deck have to go for the water and other essential supplies to people of the upper deck. And one day they say, why should we do so? Let us drill a hole in the hull of the ship. We would be able to get water to our heart's content. And the Prophet Muhammad said that the people of the upper deck allow them to do so. Not only will the people of the lower deck be destroyed, the people of the upper deck will also be destroyed. We have to understand as our community that our destiny is linked to the destiny of the people who are around us in this country. And in every country of this world. And in fact the entire world. We rise and we fall together.
We're going to go for a break. After the break, we're going to be looking at more footage of the 8 panel discussions that took place on Saturday at the conference, which was held at the Wonders Club in Johannesburg. Stay tuned to Perspective.
أصدق النجوى وأدعو الله من قلب سليم يطلب التقوى إلهي صرت في ظرف عصيب فاكشف البلوى فيا ربي أنا.
Welcome back to Perspective. On Saturday at the Wonders Club during the ASRI conference, there were 8 panel discussions, and these discussed the importance of education and training and innovation. It spoke about building safer communities, primary health, fighting corruption, transforming society and uniting the country, creating employment, which is very important, protecting the environment, and also effectively implementing policy. We're going to be watching some footage of these panel discussions and how civil society interacted with the various people that were there, like David Makura, Ibrahim Fakir, Khadija Patel, Mullah Suleiman Rawat, and many, many others, Ashraf Karda as well, and also Floyd Shivambu from the EFF. So let us have a look at some of the panel discussions that took place at the conference at the Wonders Club on Saturday.
Around the braai stand, people have opinions. Either they are venting frustration, they are raising alarm, they are highlighting concern, or they are offering their 50 cents worth regarding corruption on a very, very, very regular basis in this country. Corruption has taken a very key focus area. It has become a key focus area in the media. Many media stories in the last 20 years or so have centered around corruption, the biggest stories. It's also become a stumbling block in the path of the progress of our young democracy. Now, as we know, when a society or a country is crippled by corruption, it results in there being less money available for those who need it most. That's the bottom line. When it comes to corruption, those people who need it most get the crumbs. They don't even get a slice of the pie. Corruption eats into the nation's wealth, and it channels money away from those projects and those people that are most dependent on it. Every rand that goes into the pocket of a corrupt politician, corrupt official, corrupt businessman is a rand that is stolen from a pregnant woman who needs healthcare. It is a rand that's stolen from a boy or girl who requires education. It is a rand that is stolen from a community that requires water, roads, and schools. If you read what experts have written internationally, they have referred to corruption as a cancer, as public enemy number 1 in the developing world. And some of the reasons they have given: it threatens sustainable economic development, it threatens ethical values and justice, it destabilizes society, it endangers the rule of law, it undermines the institutions and values of democracy, and it increases the cost of public service. According to a corruption watch statement of 2012, 56% of South Africans have been party or victims to corruption. Either they've been party to corruption or victims of corruption. Willie Hofmeyer, the head of the SIU, told Parliament back in 2011 that 25 to 30 billion rands of government's annual procurement budget alone was lost to corruption, incompetence and negligence. According to some researchers, South Africa has lost a staggering 385 billion rand since 94 to corruption. I know what you're thinking. How many Nkandlas could we have built with 385 billion rand? Now, stats aside, I think the greatest concern is that in South Africa, there is fast developing a culture where corruption becomes the norm, where corruption is part of life, and it becomes then largely tolerated.
History is about a constant struggle between right and wrong, between one set of values and another, and that struggle will continue into the future, as it will be around this issue of whether we have corruption, what kind of corruption, and so on. In my experience, corruption is a major challenge. It takes various forms. It evolves in various ways. So in the old days, you would have had old-style business magnates who would influence governments and say, give me that policy on mining so I can make more money and I can extract more and I can treat my labor badly. That's corruption. You would also have had public servants that were extracting for themselves, just as you have today. And exactly as the chairperson was pointing out, these are the people who put themselves first before they put the public first. So we all speak in the name of the people. But often the people is a mask for various types of self-interest. And what's important in civil society and society more generally is to cut through that mask and say what's behind it, what motivates it, what are the driving forces that are giving us the rhetoric that we actually hear. So from my perspective, there are different forms of corruption: rank stealing, making wrong appointments, or influencing wrong appointments in government, building leases, tenders, wastefulness, regulatory influence. You can go on. The chair is already warning me about 1 minute. Now, my second point would be, we can't sit and moan about this issue. We need to find new, and that's what the NDP is about. It's about finding new forms of accountability, new forms of transparency, new forms of actually making sure that whatever we do, wherever we are, is easily detectable. Because once you shine a light brightly enough, it's very difficult to actually hide behind any kind of mask. But it's not easy. My responsibility now is in looking after municipalities, you can call it that. And there are very serious issues in municipalities and in other parts of government as well. There are politicians involved, there are officials involved, there are small businesses involved, there's big businesses involved. At the end of the day, it's South Africans who, I think, as a whole, that need to come to the party, who need to say, these are our values, these are our ethical standards, this is what we will not compromise on, these are the do's, these are the don'ts. Anybody who crosses the line, whichever background they come from, have crossed the line. And they must be treated on an equal basis. Often in our polemics, we don't cut through some of these issues in a crystal clear enough way. Last point is that all of us, whether you're in business, civil society, or government, we need public trust. We need public confidence. None of us is the public. There's a wider public outside us. And for them to trust civil society or government or anybody else, we need to enable them to believe that what we are doing is actually acting in their interest. The truth of the matter is there's a huge trust deficit in society amongst all of the key actors in society more broadly. And the question under the umbrella of the NDP would be, how do we actually narrow that trust deficit? I'm certainly committed, wherever I find myself, and there are many others like me in government, to fight corruption, to narrow the space for corruption, and we can do with all the help that you can actually offer us to achieve that goal. Thank you.
All the strategic ministries and departments were given to those that had control so that the continuity of the past continues, like Cry van Niekerk was Minister of Land and Agriculture. Dick Botha was Minister of Mineral Resources. Derek Keys was Minister of Finance. To just continue, that illustrates that the key economic sectors were safeguarded so that it's a continuation of the same system that was in place. The explanation that we got in the ANC then and until when there was still conceptualization was that the sunset clauses were a tactical retreat. You know, a tactical retreat is that you take 2 steps back, but with the aim of going further up, like what Floyd Bellwether does. You know, like but it looks like it was not a tactical retreat. It was a strategic capitulation. That the ANC has been defeated by the economic forces that have been in control and ownership of the economy of South Africa. And unless that narrow white monopoly capital is dismantled, the Freedom Charter says it should be dismantled, the crisis that confronts society will continue to happen in the manner in which they are happening now. Corruption will deepen. Okay. There will not be any hope. But civil society must play a much more visible and meaningful role. We don't hear you from civil society saying much. We need to hear you. In Parliament, there's space to listen to you. Let us heighten the voices against corruption and make sure that we build a better country.
Thank you. Thank you.
Unfortunately, we've come to the end of another edition of Perspective for this week. Remember, you can join me again next week where we can discuss stories making local, national, and international headlines. Remember, you can interact with me by sending me a mail on Faizel at itvnetworks.tv, drop me a tweet on @Faizi143, or you can even comment on facebook.com/Faizel Patel. For myself, Faizel Patel, and the magnificent team here at ITV, fi amanillah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
أناجي الحق في ليل بهيم أصدق النجوى وأدعو الله من قلب سليم يطلب التقوى أناجي الحق في ليل بهيم أصدق النجوى وأدعو الله من قلب سليم يطلب التقوى صرت في ظرف عصيب فاكشف البلوى فيا